What up, though? What up, though? We back, man. You know what I'm saying? I don't even say my niggas, but we back, though. You feel me? You gotta be who I am. You know what I'm saying? Can't change. It's the culture. Wild Indian shit. But we back in Algonkian conquest of the Mediterranean. You know what I'm saying? We back. You know, uh, a young man by the name of Kerry Mayo gave me a couple other bullets in my clip today. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to him for the amazing video he put out last night. You know what I'm saying? Nigga missed it when it dropped, but caught it this morning on the AM. Uh, it just reinforces everything we talking about. It's getting a little too heavy now. You know what I'm saying? Like it's becoming undeniable. So we're gonna get into this book. 1 second, I'm fucking around with this in the radio, rolling this little weed, rolling these herbs, as some people would like me to call it. But shit. All right, it says someone lucky enough to have a chance to explore the ancient Roman ruins surrounding the entire Mediterranean, and also the ancient Greek and Egyptian ruins in person may have seen a great deal of the ancient Atlantean civilization in those Roman and Greek and Egyptian civilized ruins. Ancient Atlantean civilizations, to many people, was more advanced than the later civilization, and even our own civilization at present time. Yet, I think otherwise to even compare the ancient Atlantean civilization to the Roman or Greek, and even the Egyptian civilization absolutely would not be right minus the Atlanteans' ability to navigate the oceans and the entire world, of course, which we know they could, and their highly advanced indoor plumbing systems. But realistically, who knows for certain? Just knowing that the Atlanteans were sailing from the north into the Mediterranean Sea region. Okay. Yeah. All right. You know what I'm saying? The 15th century, and even far more advanced than the Earth's most advanced 15th century civilization, did the Algonquins construct the European settlement as well as the North American settlements using the building material used by the later Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans? Most definitely, of course. Otherwise, there certainly would have existed a Egyptian, Greek, and Roman civilization. Historically, we know the Atlanteans must have used brick entirely of clay and mud and may have took full advantage of certain stones of construction. Some of the buildings, but of their inferior or superior of those of the Egyptians and Greek and Roman civilizations. And large Atlantean cities must have existed throughout the Atlantean Empire. And though it may have been that none of the Atlantean cities have a population over 1 million, we can accept the possibility that at least of those Atlantean cities supported by the populations in the hundreds of thousands. But it is certainly was more common for the Atlantean settlements to have a population of 10 to 20,000 to 30,000 to 40,000, of course. And certainly the great majority of those Atlantean settlements numbered only in a few hundred. Atlantean citizens throughout the Empire of Atlantis, be it in North America, Africa, Europe, and the Middle East. Agriculture operations during the Ice Age for the Atlanteans had to be backbreaking work, and the fear of the unknown must be bothered the average Atlantean farmer who had no choice but to worry about the constantly about the weather, especially North America and Europe, where the cold climates must have been very bothersome, where the crops the Atlanteans grew, and the same as the crops the present day farmers grow. And it could the possible that the Atlanteans chose the crops were not at all the crops of the modern farmers. Oh yeah, we read this. We got over this part. Let's keep it moving. The Shira Mermuk, the great coming together with the setting, with the turn, the saloon, the sky.
Buenas noches, amables amigos de esta hermosa población. Bonito este hermoso lugar de Corralero. Y hoy esta noche con ustedes el Corralero Solar. Cuando uno va llegando a ese pueblito, un palmeral desde lejos se ve y un caserío debajo en las palmas. Ese es mi pueblo en donde yo me crié.
Stop that flow, OG.
Ay, 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 qué bonito es Corralero. Ay, qué bonito, muy bonito es Corralero.
Now we know the Spanish came, we know the Asians
Ay, qué
came,
bonito, muy bonito es
we know all of
Corralero.
these soldiers mixed in.
Centro turístico
The
que hoy
Coolie
ocupa
trade,
la
we
bella
know they
laguna
trade.
bañada por el mar y sus lindas playas son unas maravillas.
Filipino trade, you know all these people have been came back and forth on top of the whole mess.
La cosa es que
It was
la
already a
costa de por sí la
navigating.
gente es muy pachanguera, muy fiestera y le gusta la música alegre, ¿no? Y eso nos dio de que, bueno, el Acapulco tropical andaba sonando con esas cumbias y boom, y qué cosa de que en aquellos años la música tropical que se difundió más fue de un grupo que era colombiano, los Corraleros de Majagual. Acá en esta región, en esta costa, pues yo era el que le sonaba sabroso a la música tropical, ¿no? Porque aquí todos, donde quiera que íbamos a tocar, ¿no? Eran llenazos. La novedad, pues, ¿no? La novedad de Corralero nadie, porque no había otro grupo de música tropical. No conozco Colombia, ¿no? Pero yo pues, me imagino que es la misma costa, ¿no? La gente morena, la gente que le gusta la alegría, la pachanga y todo eso, ¿no? Pues eso mismo se contagia a uno, desde luego, ¿no? La música tropical, que los colombianos que la difunden aquí en todo el país y pues la gente se le mete en la mente a uno la música tropical y más tropical.
Sí, el rojo guachinán. A la 1 de la mañana me vengo aquí a Margelia para meter aquí al mercado.
about. So I'm bringing awareness to the diaspora and Africa and around the world. Oftentimes, especially Africans, they never really had the possibilities then of meeting their brothers and sisters in the diaspora. And for what I understand, and we're going to go into the story immediately because we have 45 minutes and I want to get everything in there. There was a ship that was wrecked on the way. I'm not sure where they were going, but this is why you're here. And it said in the history that I've read recently that they were coming from West Africa and there were Nigerians, but there might have been other Africans on that ship. So let's start with that. Let's start with that history.
I think it's even before that, many years ago, even before Columbus came and the Europeans came to this region, Africans have been crossing the Atlantic Ocean and they have been visiting this entire region long before Columbus. And Garinagu actually is a mixture of Amerindian and African. And Carib. Amerindian part of the African Carib. Yes.
Exactly.
It is the mixture of three different races that brought the product of Garifuna.
Exactly. And that was the Arawak, the Caribs, and the Africans.
African, yes.
Exactly.
Remember, Arawak and Carib is actually the European interpretation of the Amerindian at the time.
Okay. All right.
We used to settle on St. Vincent, and we settled in St. Vincent long before 1492 when Columbus came, like I have mentioned earlier. But one important day in our history, date in our history is actually 1793. When our parents or our ancestors were actually led by Joseph Chatouye. I think almost everybody heard about Joseph Chatouye. His correct name is Joseph Chatouye, not Chatouye. So that he was our paramount chief.
Right.
Yes, and Joseph Chatouye was actually a warrior, I would say, because majority of the slaves in the entire region, they used to call St. Vincent the place of refuge.
I see.
Because when the slave would run away, they find refuge on St. Vincent. Because
okay, we're talking about the slave in St. Vincent. The slaves in St. Vincent.
Okay. Yes.
All right. Yes.
Yes, and
I want to get into this because I've read where, according to the historians, and you can't believe everything historians are saying because it's all who wrote it. But the Garifuna resisted British and French colonialism in the Antilles and were defeated by the British in 1796. Because of a violent rebellion on St. Vincent, the British, according to the history, moved 5,000 Garifuna across the Caribbean to Bay Island off the north of Honduras. So from there, they migrated to the Caribbean coast of Nicaragua, Honduras, Guatemala, and Belize. So by 1802, about 150 Garifunas had settled in I believe it's called Dan Creek, but no, they call it Dangriga area.
All right, we have Marco Polo's map right here. I wish I could get y'all one day we'll get y'all a better view of that. That's what we're doing right there. Olmec rock paintings. How they depicted themselves. It's how the Garifuna in their region and what they're now talking about. They already was, like we said, the Carib people. Carib people already were a selling people. Olmec were already a selling people. It says, we shall send them back to Tartarian abodes, till Arby shall exalt us to the heavens. Batua's frontier was the River Don, and all the Russian long remain tributaries. If we add to these invasions of the progress of the Mongols in America, which there is a stronger reason to conclude reach Rhode Island, their conquest, as their influence had merely surrounded the earth in a single century. These hardy warriors, whose chief resisted at Pekin after the death of Kublai Khan in 1294, being the possession of the immense power of the grandeur, which surrendered by the Lamas, who flattered their vanity and uh, minister to their, I'm looking at that word already, like voluptuousness. So basically, the descendants of the renowned Genghis, that they were driven from the throne of Pekin in 1369 because of their Siberian abodes, which we find there afterwards engaged in conflicts with Timirbi and uh, says in 1519, there it is. It says, does not appear the last reason. Conclude that Pizarro and others landed in Peru in 1576. Such an extraordinary beginning as they were deemed had ever been heard before. When these Mongols arrived, America, we shall see, was the rudest condition. Uh, Suddenly, two empires are formed, which the pomp, ceremonies, and the grandeur of Asiatic sovereigns. Architecture rivaled the stupendous works of the Romans, the elegance and the arts of the goldsmith surpassing the delicate works of Europeans, other justice and subordinations, all above the law of the military and civil. Mexico was executed by Cortez in 1526. You see your Olmecs fought back against the Mongols, did what they could, but eventually you got the invasion on two fronts. The invasion in 1490 and 15, arrival in San Domingo in 1502 and 1503. Guerrero was the earliest African to reach America, as Columbus was produced in time. But what about Estebanico? So we already know about Estebanico. The Atlantic in the 15th, and the slave servants, and many have traveled with the to the Caribbean. And although evidence which participants uh, in the, I think this is asterisk, they count the Alonso Puerto, or Puerto, the pilot of the Nina on the, it can't stop, man. My bad, y'all, with that document, man, it got cut off. Another Marco Polo map. Zambo, this is Don and them supposedly that ran off and mixed in with the Peruvians. Three princes. They'll come back, that's fine. This is why I say the people that came from Africa knew who they were. Until 7-year-old Mammoth Marwood, which was given his freedom by Upton Bell, Montgomery County in Washington, D.C., an area established a hauling business, owned real estate on what is now 3330-3332 Dent Place Northwest, and invested some of his savings into stocks and banks in Colombia. Yarwood lived to be more than 100 years old, and the date of his birth and his death have been recorded 1736 to 1844. In Georgia, Sapalo Island, Rilo Muhammad of the Fulan, Timo Futal John Jalan, in the present day Guyana, Conakry. By 1806, he became the plantation manager of Thomas Spalding and a prominent uh, Georgian master. Baal bin Ali was the leader of one of America's earliest known Muslim communities, which enslaved Bilali, which the community leader Lamon released 80 men in Sapalo Island during the War of 1812. He told his slave master that he had 80 men of the celebrating today's when they came. Bilal was buried with his Quran and a prayer rug. In 1829, Bilal wrote the 13-page book in Arabic called the Ben Ali Diary about some of the laws of Islam and Islamic living. The book is currently housed at the University of Georgia in Athens. Bilal and his wife, Phoebe, had 2 sons and 7 daughters. One of those is reported to be the Aaron of the author of Joel Chandler Harris' work, Uncle Remus and Briar Rabbit story. Bilal's daughter's name was Margaret. In Timor district of West Africa, he was captured in 1782 and sold to a plantation in the Bahamas. Then was brought to the U.S. around 1803. You hear the timing on this? Bilal lived in 1770 to 1846. In 1860 and 1840, Salah Bilal was trusted head and slave manager and more than of 450 slaves. So they brought these men over there as managers. This is how to say they got kidnapped. Sound like they wouldn't have got them because they were good at what they did. John Hamilton Corporal was reported to be his master's son, and while Salah was on his deathbed, that his last words are Allah's God and Muhammad's prophet. Haja Omar Saeed was captured in 1807, and in 37 Omar was a Fula born Fortra in present-day Senegal. He was born in Salou, learned to read and write Arabic and Islamic studies, and made Hajjaj to the Mecca before his capture. Omar and teach sheikhs were his brother Muhammad Saeed, Sheikh Salmani Kami, and Sheikh Gabriel Abdal. Omar was enslaved in Charleston, South Carolina, and he labored for a short period before he escaped in 1810 to Fayetteville, North Carolina, where he was caught and imprisoned. During Omar's imprisonment, he persuaded James Owen, a general in the state militia, and people invaded enslavement and other abuses in the indigent forces upon non-white Southerners in the recent years. Even some of the Turks have come to doubt their origin story, choosing instead to embrace the idea that they are Native Americans. In 2013, the South Carolina government recognized some of the Sumner tribes of Cheraw, a step that opened a rift in small community. Mr. Vanny brushes aside the idea where he lived as Native American Indians. He said, now there is another layer of both clarity and complication. A new book published in the University of the South, their own cluster of insular dark complexion families suspended in the tricky southern spaces between the white and non-white, and some would say between the fact and legend. For some of the 20th century, the authorities of the Sumner County treated them that way to were segregated in Turkish public schools, Turkish theaters, seats, and Turkish hospital beds because the Turks traced their ancestry to a man described as Caucasian of Arab descent, they were allowed to vote in the age of Jim Crow. This was Mr. Bennett Haley's relatives told it the Turks are descendants from. He said these are Christopher Columbus. Some of the people that are on the boat with him, Rodrigo, you know what I'm saying, on the crew in the Santa Maria, Rodrigo, Compto Parala, Diego, Saldar, serving in Columbus, Luis de Torres, the interpreter, Rodriguez, the Jerez. Remember, we went over this already. All of these people, all these people are Basque. Everybody was Basque. Everybody was Moorish Basque. Portuguese, no sort of name. food. So all others stored in wooden casks. According to some reports, they were cheap and faulty construction, permitting and preserving brine and leak out of the meat cast, and the moisture evaded the cast and dried provisions. All other stores in the hold and uh, distribution of what was normally reserved for those casks carrying dry provisions of copper barrel markers uh, were responsible for keeping the cask tight and almost impossible challenge. Food, mostly boiled, was served in a large communal wooden bowl, and it consisted of poorly cooked meat with bones in it, and the sailors attacking it with fever, pricking it with their fingers, and they had no forks and other spoons. The larger pieces of meat were cut with a knife, and each sailor carried. At the time of Columbus, the only means of cooking was a firebox called a foggin. It was equipped with. I said, this nigga was eating terrible. Esteban Nico in the morning. Pablo Vera de la Costa was received and commissioned and captured and recommendation of Don Alvarez de Zuna, the captain Alonso de Castillo Maladando of the Dr. Castillo Alessandro Maldo, Esteban Nico de Blackamore of Azamur, the west coast of Morocco, the slave of Don. I can't see that. Damn, man, this shit always cutting something off. It says Quranic theme, the Huguenot literary productions, the beautiful poem of God's nature by Funeral, the Huguenot, New York. Here are three quotes taken from the chapter 6 of Al Naam, the translation of the Quran, to the precisely the point of the continual transmissions of Islamic views of the world amidst through his Huguenot and Muslim ancestor family environments. It is God who splits the grain and the date stone, bring forth the living of the dead from the dead. He brings forth. Sorry, motherfucker, cutting grass. Huguenot history, description of the fate of European and the occupation and the skills and etc. And so integrally related to the Muslims that there is not far-fetched to investigate their being Muslims. Remember, it is well known that well before the fall of the Muslim Armada, that the Waliats of the Sicily and the Spanish Muslims had to use two names, where one is to hide their Muslim origins when passing through, doing business with people in enemy areas, such as an investigation becomes more of a possibility when we know that the Muslims in Spain and other parts of Europe are known in many dominations, Moors, Moriscos, religionaries, Majoris, and cryptos. The Shalenga, possibly the Maya Shalengo, tassel with the curl hair of the Zila to bristle to fluff up birds' hair or feathers, or Z, or Igana, or backbone. Chilango. We're just talking about the invasion. From the inside of the country, not from the coast. Character with fuzzy hair. So the word evolved into Chilango. It will be used as a derogatory term for the Mexico City locals. I remember when I was a kid, a common phrase in North Mexico, Haza partida mata un Chilango. Make a motherland happy, kill a Chilango. You know, their very special, loving feeling that people not living in the big city have against those living the big life. Mexicans and Aztecs who accompanied the seven tribes. Calavero described the Aztecs as the reduced to slavery and the lowest state of degradation under the insignificant Cholulus, but he acknowledged that the Chechemias and Aztecs and Mexicans are frequently called in history the Mexicans without discrimination or distinguishing the Mexicans from those who arrived before them. It may be allowed as they spoke the same language. The Montezuma's race were Aztecs, but the following reasons are offered that they arrived by sea and not with the seven tribes.
Dress figures, and they danced for him to the sound of a war drum stretched tight with an animal's skin. Then he said the young women came out, and they were tall and shapely and dressed in their finery. Their hair was braided, and they had white and blue conch shells in their hair that hung like locks and around their neck. And then they had wrapped around their body a match coat, which was red and blue, which is a shawl, that fitted loosely about their body, that their mahogany skin shone through. Then he went on to say that their faces were painted and they made in the chat. It's a Issa that are not suing. Else for me to talk about, but I will say that that one person is only one person on a council, and if a council doesn't agree, we go on every single thing. So yes, if you get back to what transition from Itza to Issa, you will find the same origin of the Naga of the waters, or iguana. It's the iguana. When you get to, and that's what I say again about, along with doing genealogy, but traveling to places and actually talking to these elders in the chat. So, yes, if you get back to what transition from Itza to Issa, you will find the same origin of the Naga of the waters, or iguana. It's the iguana.
So the pre-Mayan prototype Mayans are the archaeologists there. The likeness revealed that they weren't Mayan at all. There were many faces, many people in Mesoamerica long before Columbus, while most of them carved frequent Olmec sites, controversially dated 1000 BC, definitely Negroid, with kinky beards and braided hair. Some were definitely Semitic and possibly Phoenician. They The emergence of the civilization of the Near East of 6,000 and 7,000 years ago. No lie, but the story is exclusive emergence and revealed a profound ignorance of what occurrence in the rest of the world and what had occurrence in the past civilizations, academia, and isolation of the Americas from the. One sec, y'all, we gonna pause. She's a very little, having many wives. But no, we still got to find the chatter way for. We can't get lost. We can't get lost. It said the Indian subcontinent and the Southeast Asia journeyed to Mexico on the ships of the Manila Galleon. Upon the arrival of Mexico, they were grouped together and categorized as chinos, and the experience illustrates the interconnectedness of Spain's colonies and reached the crown, which brought people together from Africa, America, Asia, and Europe in a historically unprecedented way. In time, Chinos and Mexicos came treated under the law as Indians, becoming indigenous vassals of the Spanish crown in 1672. The implications of the legal change was enormous, as the Indians rather than the Chinos, as Indians rather than Chinos. This could no longer be held as slaves. Tatiana Sejas tracks the Chinos' journey from slave markets in Manila to the streets of Mexico City to the bondage to the liberty, enduring the challenges of the community have assumptions about the. It says the inhabitants of Asia had long and controversial connection to the Iberian conquered Americas, even named Indians bestowed upon the native people, believe Europeans' hopes to exceptions of reaching the wealthy exotic kingdom of the East thought that Christopher Columbus ever since 1498 had been much speculation of the origins of the Native Americans and Asian pre-Columbian contact with the cultures of Central and South Asia. Speaking in terms of the past 5,000 years, arguably longer, there are reliable archaeological or human chronicle evidence of Asians having reached from New Spain to the Philippines in 1564 and 1565, which pushed the use of the Manila Galleon and Las de China. China ships transported Asian products and individuals to Acapulco and the Mexican parts of for approximately 250 years during the first wave of the transatlantic. Various kingdoms of South Asia and India were known collectively as New Spain as Chinos, Chinese, Indios, Chinos, Chinese, Indians, and the word Chino China became synonymous with Asia, although the galleons traded had been thoroughly studied by scholars. During the late 16th and 17th centuries, countless slaves, culturally diverse communities in the Indian subcontinent and Southeast Asia joined to Mexico on the ships in the middle of the galley. Upon arrival, they grouped together. Oh, we already read. Boom, we got a picture of them. Look who came. Now, if you seen these people today dressed in feathers, who would they be? So do you get why we say I go too far with the Muslim rap? My bad. Can't do too much J Electronica. Into the white man's grave. By the 19th century, the Europeans believed firmly that the coast of West Africa was the white man's grave. They understood the phenomenon in a literal sense that the people from Europe were racially incapable of surviving in the African climate, whereas Africans were genetically equipped to do so. In fact, Europeans did die frightening numbers, but the cases was not the climate. It was a diseased environment. The Europeans' weakness was not racial, but a lack of immunity to the yellow fever and malaria, and particularly the immunity of the Africans acquired in childhood. For Europeans planners for economic overseas, the heavy costs of activities in West Africa were simply the worst examples of considerable price of the Europeans had to pay for the actions in the tropical world. In like 1830, military death of the West Indies had been important interpreters of statistical investigations of the health of the British armies, creating a kind of data used for this article. The deaths of the overseas continue to be well published in Britain by Florence Nightingale in the Parliament, and the deaths of the Crimea of the 1850 and the Royal Commission on the health of the Army of India in 1860 and the France individuals and agencies carried out in parallel investigations. As a result of those investigations are well known. The conquest of malaria killed the killer of Europeans. It was after the Europeans' death dropped, especially as the result of success of the introduction of quinine, a protophylactic. It had been argued that the colonial conquest because became a feasible or at least attractive option for the European powers. The French experience with malaria was established in the interrelationship between malaria and the imperialism, but one quite different from which we usually argue. Imperial conquest was depended upon the lower European death rates. As you can see, until they got quinine, they couldn't even really get up into Africa like they wanted to. South America, these places were killing them. That's why they had to make that deal with Al Mansour and Queen Khalifa. You feel me? I'm not Queen, not Queen Khalifa, but Queen Elizabeth and Al Mansour. They had the Bloody Mary. Was it Bloody Mary? I'm gonna have to check that for y'all. I don't know. I'm throwing names out there. I'm sorry, y'all, that I'm fucking those up. But all on that line. But there was definitely a Anglo-Moroccan alliance that they would take the South and she would take the North. And that was the deal. You know what I'm saying? And that's why you got Iberian conquest like the Turk and Caicos and different places like that. You know what I'm saying? Got different names like that. Or you'll see in Mexico, there's a lot of Turkish influence like the taco, the churro. We'll get into that shit later. That these are, you know what I'm saying, Moorish, or what would you say, Iberian, or you know what I'm saying, Blackamoor customs, not African, Blackamoor. As you can see, we went over the 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 black roots of Europe, so it's not even worth arguing over anymore. You know what I mean? Yes, there's definitely a Scandinavian, Upper Norwegian, Northern Slavic, Baltic person. Yes, we understand that, but no, they definitely had to come down into Southern Europe where it's hot all year round and invade. We know about the Corware invasion, the Yamanan or whatever they call them invasion the of Europe, the barbarian invasion of Europe. And then after that, after they tried once, they came back again with Cromwell. So let's keep it moving. All right. But you see, it was just a white man's death, man, associated with Leopold of Belgium. Once they got this is when they really opened up the Africa to the world. So racial authenticity, it says, certain remembered places are treated as sacred sense of being source of deep abiding identity, and the religious powers acquired through perceived fidelity and actions done here to the ones done there in their directions endowed with the mythical feeling to those one to the value the second edge of the temporal one of uh, the the fertility and the desire to suggest one's deiphoric affiliations and map an authentic past always and inevitably in relation to a present situation. There's a necessity. They're necessarily in the narrowly instrument sense of the past used in the present purpose of that is a hell of a name. Notions usefully critiqued by Rosalind Shaw, but more modestly, how the memories of a distinct site take shape in a material context, exerts a retractive force of past and context of specific ideas of future redemptions, Benjamin, and yet the opening gambit from the limited conceptual clarity, inadequate described flesh in the form of people who were everyday practice often conducted themselves in relation to multiple such horizons. Take an example, the Garifuna, from known by the Europeans as the Black Caribs, to whose religious practices this easily devotes the attention to the Garifuna society derived from the mixed Amerindian, African, and European attendants, and is mainly located in the 60 villages along the Caribbean and coastal America, and the majority of the Honduras for the Garifuna in the Central Americas, and the spiritual axis and the authentic religious practices have over 2 centuries been that of the former homeland and places of the ethnogenesis of the small island of St. Vincent. The St. Vincent, their ancestors returned through the spirit of possession to John, and the living descendants of the ritual events and the spiritual geography portrays the memory and the origins of the island during the last generations. However, the local decline is available of fruit industry and employment, and a third of the population, 100,000 to 300,000, have migrated abroad, especially to New York. This leaves us talking created that the dysphoric horizon of the Central American villages left behind now equated to the glow of ancestral fidelity and religious power to the New York-based Garifuna, always becoming increasingly the attention to the bullshit. Let's see. Says about his name. However, there is no doubt that the painting corresponds precisely with the Nunez de la Vega tells us that Tezna divinity Akau, Akan, Maya, Ek, Ahu, name with the translate the black chief, or with the kings of the black. He is reported to have been a famous warrior, the most cruel. He was depicted in the figure of the most fierce blackamoor with the members of men, the blacks, of whom he was the king, were 7 numbers. I said with the 7, right? We back with the 7 again. They did not come. The Aztecs did not come. The Aztecs did not come with the 7 tribes. The Aztecs did not build anything. Let's go over that one more time. They were squatters. Sorry, I'm not trying to front on them. They have indigenous ties to the land, but theirs were through attempted conquest. And then once they got another helping from Cortez, which we'll get into in a second, with Malinche, or her snitch ass, the La Negrita, her rat ass, she went out here, the mother of the mestizo, she went out here and fucked us all off. All of us, the last ones who had to fight for Guerrero, the prince of the last of the indigenous, to hold us down. Him, Billy Bowlegs, you know what I'm saying? My boy, John Horse, you know what I'm saying? The last of the Seminole Scouts, your Massey, Goulet, Geechee, you know what I'm saying? Alabama, you know what I'm saying? Uli Maya, coming up out of the Georgia, bottom southern states, we all had to fight, you know what I'm saying? After being sandwiched by everybody. So let's just keep it real. The Black Devils, this is what happened. So Friday has been in numerous, but you see what's popping right there. Let's keep sliding. So although no Mayan boats have been rediscovered, is simple evidence of the dugout canoes were in the standard means of transportation. Aside with the matters of size, we safely assumed that the river crafts were small, and the seagoing boats and the Mayan canoes took several forms, including illustrations apparently with the bones found in the royal burial of Tikal, depicting some of the best of these variant Mayan illustrations show most objects in the profile, which limits the understanding of the canoe designs is viewed in the show. There's a clear difference between the shear line and shape is ignorance. Wow. Earth's appearing of various names as the American, the land of the eventual became the United States, is recorded in Spanish in 16 Amarisque, the tribal name contained in the title of the Florida missions of El Nombre de Dios de Amarisque, which was acknowledged by Yamasee towns located in the Temuco province of La Florida. Swanton applied the name Amarisque to the original name of the Yamacraw and abbreviated some of the name Yamasee appeared in the South Carolina records as Amasi. Flames, nigga. Interior Census of the Department of Washington, D.C. in the 1984 announced the existence of 19 tribes in South Carolina claimed by the Creek Nation as the Muscogee Confederation, and that at the time inhabited at least half of the state. The Yamasee, the Jamasee, also referred to as the American and Amarisque, or the Americo, which listed among the 19 tribes as being of the dark complexion found widely scattered among the inhabitants of North and South America. They were supposed to have been the immigrants from Africa prior to the European discovery of America, whom De Leon persisted in slave hunting in Bayfort, South Carolina in 1520. Having captured Francisco de Chicora at the time, Leon referred to the Yamasee and Jamasee, also implied as the Americans or the Amarisque or the Americo, as Negroes being valued in labor, while the Indians were deemed worthless. Pat Sherlock Elder is the Melungeon examining the Appalachian Levin wrote an Englishman deemed the people of North Africa so dark as they be called black is historically used the more Negro almost interchangeably. Simply brought up was from Brooklyn. Shit, it get boring just looking. Be like Bill Cosby, pour it in the pudding. Hey, Star Spangled Banner. Like the car king with hammers, he's back. So the high president Brazilian, later in Africa and Asia, where the least the part American racial background, some Americans were utilized as military auxiliaries to the Portuguese soldiers. As well, in 1641, the auxiliaries were sent to Bahia and Rio de Janeiro to reinforce the troops of Angola. In 1644, the king approved a point to send Hernique Diaz and the non-white auxiliaries from Bahia to Angola. Diaz was needed and assisted in Brazil to fight the Dutch in 1645. An expedition left Rio de Janeiro for Angola. In 1648, 2,000 men were sent to Rio de Janeiro to Angola, and the Portuguese troops in Angola were accompanied in their campaign by auxiliary native troops, and that we can be confident that the Brazilian contingents included persons of American origin. So you telling me that when we take these DNA tests, we don't ever see this over there? Where's the proof of this with the DNA? Because that's how you know that shit is just bullshit. Because we have not been shown one Angolan Mayan settlement. Where is it at? The models. So linguistic families prove that the associated racial difference, but racial differences is not always associated with the disparteness of the linguistic families is recorded that certainly individual tribes and nations have in the course of time been prevailed upon to adopt the idioms of the neighboring population, especially when conquered by them, although the methods how and to infer a different race was from a thorough racial dispartedness of language and above the conception even of the most learned men in the 16th century. We see that as well as the same common adventurers who flooded the island of the coast of America were close observers of the ethnographic peculiars of the tribes that they visited. Their records leave the dark concerning the language spoke by the Tesquetas and the Calos of the southern extremities of Florida. We cannot gather from the whether the Caribs of the western or the northern Indians were settled in the peninsula at the time of their visit, but they transmit us many peculiar traits and customs which they have been inferred that all southern Indians of the Gulf states belong to one stock. Our present knowledge of the Timucuan show that it state that there is no racial connection with uh, the Gallips dialect of the southern Arawak, Kumas, Gothas, Chamuas, etc., nor is it extinct Gallips idioms of the West Indians, the Irie, the Tainos, the Lucayos. You said the Irie, not Ireland, but the Irie. These are a Indian tribe. I hear some people were trying to throw that on the Jamaicans, like. Yeah, they do have a mix with the Irish stock, but we definitely have to keep it real. The Irie was already there. All right, let's keep it pushing. Nor was the Caribs on the coast of Honduras. Well, therefore, discontinuance in some degree of the foregoing speculations of concerning Carib colonies and their influence of the Indians in the Appalachia County indulges of the Harvard's catalog number 1. Harvard quotes that the term from Bristol. Oh, that's in a different. That's a whole lot of Spanish for that ass. But y'all see that down there if y'all wanna get in on that. Familiar Eto, Amerigo, Alua, Arco, Alani, the Flechas, the Tanabo, the Lago, the Estuate, the Nobuaya, the Estreek, the Malingo, Arboreek, the Huna, as you see in the Appalachians. Slows carried, especially in the war expeditions, the Indians showed a feeling of repugnance towards them. The Timucuans declared war by sticking a number of arrows into the ground, fillers up in the close vicinity of the enemy camps. This was done with the utmost secretly in the night before the attacks, and the locks of human hair were seen dangling from the end of the arrow, and the chief led with the warriors on the warpath, clubs and arrows and bows in hands. And when the fight had begun, they placed themselves in the center of the combatants, and the usual modern attacks were surprised that the enemies, as done by all the Indians, they fought valiantly and impetuously. When they compelled to fight openly, the weapons were spears, clubs, bows, and arrows, and small targets hung from on the chest. So you see, he's talking about guerrilla warfare. This is the same thing that your boy Francis Marion learned from my people up there in the Carolinas. As you can see, this was the art of war. That's how we got out in that jungle warfare, that trench warfare, that urban warfare. Smash and grab, bang and go, come back, attack and smack, bend the block, double back on the double back. Y'all know what it is. Have them ducking something. All right, so we're gonna sit here and keep it moving. You know what I'm saying? The warriors put to death, the men captured through expedition. Let's see. Oh, wait. Valiantly and impetuously, when they compelled to fight openly, the weapons were spears, clubs, and arrows, and the small targets hung on the chest. The arrows were landed with stones and fish bones, but being worked quite handsomely and carefully, the warriors put to death all men captured through the expeditions. To this are recorded cut off their arms above the elbows and their legs above the knees, took their scalps and ran the arrows into their anus, leaving the men in a condition on the battlefield. The scalps uh, and sometimes cutting off the limbs were brought to the camps and stuck on poles, and they were left and connected with garlands. And during the scout dance, which lasted 3 days and nights, the most revolting orgies were gone through, and the oldest of the women were compelled to join in hands in the maiden dance, and the scalps were slain, were smoked over a fire, and praise and sung to the sun for victory obtained. Women and children of the enemy were kept as slaves, and warriors obtained the heads with all kinds of feathers and leaves and planted like the Aztecs and the Mayas, or drew the heads or skins of some of the wild animals over the foreheads and protect the heads with when unity on hunting games they hid themselves in the deer skins and thus shot the game by decoy. And the various Superstitions of the hunters are contained that the Pirges queries. He also speak of a barbarous provision houses by Les Moyens. Picture shows that these were low palisades huts roofs over having only one issue, the maize gathering season. The mission in 1616, the number was increased by the 12 others. In 1638, the war took place against the Appalachian Indians in the civil administration of the province, which in 1655 and 1675, the hands of the governor Don Diego de Rabala and the capital general, his successor, having 1675 1680, Don Juan Hita de Scott. We ain't gonna get lost in it. Governor Juan Marquez attempting to remove the Indians to Florida, to the Appalachia, to the West Indian Islands until the revolt broke in San Felipe, San Simmons, and Catalina, Salpo, Tuchipalaso, you see that, Abu Dalacuni, and some other towns. The natives immigrated to Georgia, overtook the refuge in forest. The revolts does not seem to have been extended over those Pueblo towns. The scent that later printed became King Charles II, 1700, were evidently well satisfied with their present governor. As you can see, these are the same towns that they say all those tribes we just named were the same ones after the Timucuan Wars and all that. Now you see, you choose the wrong side, you're gonna end up a Negro. You're gonna end up called a Negro. Hands down, is next minute you're gonna know you eat people. After what they describe, you're now a cannibal. You smoking scalps. So when they pull up, they see you cooking heads. They see you doing all this wild shit. You know, your next step is slavery. Okay. Since Juan Marquez attempted to remove the Indian tribes to Florida, to Appalachians extended to the West Indian Islands, and a revolt broke out in Sanford. Yeah, we read down that one. Okay. Then perhaps the conquest, 1687, some Yamasi Indians living underneath Spanish rule left the country for the south, invaded the missions of San Catalina for the province of the Timucuan, and pillaged the churches and convents of San Francisco by removing it plate and vestigements, burnt the town of the Timucuans, killed many of the converted Indians, while others were brought as slaves to St. Helena. The resources given by the Yamasi for the unprecedented massacre was that they distinguished with the rule of the Franciscans and tried to put at an end to the English uh, instigation, where they supposed to be at the bottom of the English colonists of Georgia and the Carolinas, jealous of the Spanish, and the power began in 1702 and the series of inroad into Florida, which instead of half a century entitled Much of the Misery of the Spanish Indians. You see that much of the Spanish Indians. So you see this is where the split is happening. So whenever certain tribes went out, you know what I mean, you get to keep your history, but the other people don't. So they keep bleaching out, they keep doing their own thing, they keep fucking with who they fucking with, and the whole time history is on their side. You feel what I'm saying? So you start to understanding what this thing is in America. It's all politics and bullshit. You feel me? As we stand here and you look at the other people, we have an ancient beef that happened because one team couldn't stay on their side of the Mississippi and with the Westos, and then you got the your Massey Seminoles, Alabama Mayan stock, Olmec stock, who can't stop going over their side and fucking with the people who we had an agreement after a certain time. That's what the whole meeting up down at Tikal was, and the rejoining of the seven. But we couldn't seem to keep this agreement because of colorism. You know what I'm saying? I'm lighter than you, your hair prettier than mine, whatever you want to call it. This bullshit, whoever got the claim or whatever. This is what we arguing and bitching about. This is why they say Mexicans and niggas will always be the easiest ones to conquer, because we just can't let it go. We can't let it go. We can't let it go. But let's keep it moving. It's a sad thing because, you know, if you think about it, what the fuck is scarier in this world? If I told you I had 10 million of American Negro Indians and Mexicans coming at any time, who want that? Nobody. But that's different talk for different time. I don't mean to get all lost out in the weirdness. You know, that type of shit to get your lips popped, you know, by your mama. Like, I put your lips out, you talking reckless. But, you know, it's got to be said sometimes. The English colonists of Georgia and the Carolinas, jealous of the Spanish and their power, began in 1702 with the series to enroll into Florida, to which instead of half a century and entail much of the misery of the Spanish Indians, Colonial Daniels, who led forces of the Governor Moore's army in 1702 to St. Augustine and met as far known as with the resistance of these incursions lasted from 1706, and the enroll of the Alabama Indians occurred in 1705. Further English inroads are recorded for the years of 1719, 1720, 1736, and 1745. It's altogether impossible that the Timucuan Indians survive at the present time, for the pebbles of the Atamusquas and the Mosquitoes lagoons and the various colonies which sustained long in the beginning of the English raids. This is without to an advance towards the pyramid of the sun and the fragments in the kind and the eye in every direction, and the field strewn with pottery and masks and small figurines, ex voto, small idols, broken cups, and axes. I select myself some of the masks which are the pottery of various Indian types, marvelous trust in the times, and without some of the artistic skill among those types do not seem to be belonging to the Americas. A Negro whose thick lips and flat nose and woolen hair proclaim his supposed African origin, belonging to this a Chinese head, a Caucasian head, and a Japanese specimen head, retaining the retracting foreheads, and displayed at Palenque. I always tell people, look for the nigga's forehead. If you want to know where a nigga from, they forehead just gonna go up 2 inches and it's just gonna shoot back, and they're gonna want to grow some hair all of a sudden. That's your Mayan, Carib, Indio stock. You know them. Just like when you see your Mayan who been mixed out with a little bit of Asian, a little bit of Chino, and a little bit of this and that, you'll notice that they got a little bit of this forehead problem. They ain't the fact that they can't grow hair; they just got a hell of a forehead on. But these are the statues they talking about. Takao Tulum. That mixture of Negro blood was very small in the hands of the undeveloped, as almost simian are as observable. Thank you,
You better
baby.
do a good job. I'm trusting you right now. I'm not even fussing,
Okay.
but I will.
Niggas wild. But y'all see what it is. We still pushing. Yeah, I know. So when they love you. Huh? It says, born 500 years BC, at the most equipment, the Greek philosophers speak of the grand division of the world beyond the ocean, Elian and the various historians in the book and the chapters in the city of the Temple Louis and the eminent Greek historians born in 300 years BC and standing in the Mirafin inhabitants of a large continent beyond the ocean in comparison, which is known in the world to be but an island. And the artists say in a chapter 84 to 85 beyond the pillars of Hercules. As we read in the book of the philosophy of fire, you know what I'm saying, that the pillars of Hercules, you remember Atlas, Black At, you know what I'm saying, my boy Black Atlas was tricked out of his golden apples and oranges from the Hesperides by your man Hercules. But he got away with his little bag of, I guess they help you live forever, these apples. For life. For my life. Okay. Going up. After that go side. And I'm with that. Hey. It says, say in chapter 84 and 85, beyond the pillars of Hercules, they say that the inhabitants of an island discovered by the Carthaginians in the bound forests and navigable rivers, fruits of all kinds in distinct continents and days. The Carthaginians are always engaged in making voyages to this land, and some have settled on accounts of fertility on the soil, and the Senate decreed that no one thereafter, under the penalty of death, should voyage thereon to Aristotle, which was before 300 years, 84 years before Christ. The Arcadius of Sicily, who lived in the century preceding the Christian era, says in the book that the Phoenicians, instead of the Carthaginians, who cast upon the most fertile. Shout out to Carrie Mayo for that drop.